Hey everybody, welcome on our channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Korra and Asami? Part 2. If you are new on the channel, don't forget to subscribe our channel and like the video too. So without wasting any more time, let's start the story. So you caught him, eh? Spoke the form of Naruto as he descended down a long flight of stairs, illuminated by the light of torches. At his side was a woman with long black hair and crimson eyes, a rapier at her hip as she followed him. You told us to keep an eye out for any creeps with white hair asking about you. And this man fits the bill. We observed him for a while to make sure he wasn't a body double of some sort, and then he got into an altercation with Korra. And by altercation, I mean she beat him within an inch of his life. The raven-haired woman replied, earning a chuckle from her boss. Sounds about right. Still, I didn't think it would be so easy to catch Jiraiya. Incompetent he may be, he is still a slippery bastard. Most especially when his manhood is at stake. Naruto spoke with an annoyed sigh, a part of him wishing he'd killed the Toad Sannin years ago. Scratch that, he should have killed him after that stunt with the cliff. His companion said nothing, but a roll of her eyes showed that she was equally annoyed. After their quick exchange, they entered some kind of torture chamber where all manner of crude machinery and sharp-looking tools were neatly arranged along the side wall. And in the middle of the room were two figures, one a female with light blue hair wearing a military cap and the other a white-haired male who was stripped down to his boxers and tied to the table in a spread-eagle position. Hello, Boss-kun. Your subject is awake. The brunette spoke with a slight bow and gave the blonde a quick tip of the hat. The whiskered man approached, after getting one look at his captive, his face scrunched up in a brief flash of frustration, but quickly melted into an amused smile. Well, as I live and breathe. Mizuki-sensei. Long time no see. Last I saw you, you attempted to dupe me into stealing the forbidden scroll, and then I used an army of shadow clones to pulverize you. Naruto spoke with a smirk, his captive growling at the boy. So this is not the man called Jiraiya. How disappointing. The crimson-eyed woman muttered with a sneer, hoping that the slaying of this Jiraiya character would bring her master some much-needed joy. We'll get him eventually. But where are my manners? Mizuki. Meet Raven Branwen, one of my numerous bodyguards. And you have already made the acquaintance of General Esdeath, one of my chief enforcers, kindred spirit to Anko, and an artiste in the field of torture. The blonde spoke, introducing his two subordinates. The brunette gave a quick two-fingered salute while the raven-haired woman rolled her eyes again, not seeing the point in being polite to a dead man soon to be at least. So these fishes follow your orders, you little shit. The silver-haired man shrieked at the end when the general yanked back one of his thumbs, making it snap. The blonde gestured for her to stand down and not to interrupt them again, making her nod. Sorry about that. The girls don't like it when someone badmouths me. So, what are you doing snooping around? Don't tell me Konoha's so desperate for ninjas that they reinstated a schmuck like you. The blonde asked in amusement as he gestured towards the prisoner's belongings, which included a Konoha headband, and then held out his hand. Raven reached between her fists and pulled out a small box. She snapped it open, revealing a set of different colored lollipops. The blonde took a pink one and popped it into his mouth as he awaited Mizuki's response. He didn't need to wait long as the former teacher cackled and replied in a snide tone, didn't you hear? Konoha's under new management now. Ah. So they found someone to replace Tsunade-chan. Who was it? Jiraiya. Naruto asked, his question causing the Chunin to snort in amusement. Okay. Not Jiraiya then. If you tell me what I want to know, I'll release you from your current predicament. The blonde promised with a wink, though he had his fingers crossed behind his back. Ha! You think I'm that stupid? I talk, you won't have any more reason to keep me alive. The Chunin shouted, glaring at his former student, but his words caused the young Yakuza boss to laugh instead, making Mizuki give him a confused look. You're a tad smarter than I thought. But just a tad. If you were feeling cooperative I would have released you by cutting your throat open and watching you expire. But, seeing as how that is not the case, let's just say you will come to understand exactly why death is a mercy, not a punishment. The blonde spoke and then turned his attention towards the brunette. General, use whatever methods of torture you like on this man to make him talk. And once you're certain he has been squeezed dry of info, continue torturing him for touching Korra. Try to keep him alive as long as possible while doing so. At his orders, the blue-haired woman smiled so sweetly that it would make a person feel sick just looking at her. She grabbed a pair of rubber gloves and spoke, not to worry boss. I am a professional. At her words, Mizuki swallowed loudly and knew that he was in a jam. This was not the same Naruto he remembered from the academy. Wait, hold up. I'll tell you anything you want, I'll cooperate. Mizuki blubbered, hoping to save himself from whatever inhumane torture the general had in mind for him. Naruto gave a disinterested shrug and spoke back, too late for that. There's no take-backs in the world of ninja or Yakuza. But that said, the blonde casually walked away, even as his ex-sensei screamed for him to reconsider and began pleading for his life. As Naruto and Raven exited the chamber, the doors slammed shut behind them, and then came more screams of a begging nature, followed by pain-induced screeching. "Who do you think sent him?" Raven asked with a raised eyebrow, her sword hand almost itching to carve someone up. Naruto sucked on the bubblegum-flavored lollipop for a second and then replied, "Mizuki mentioned new management. If not Jiraiya, then my top guess would be a man called Danzo Shimura. The Sandai Ami's longtime rival, a schemer, and a power-hungry warhick with absolutely no moral fiber. Once Esdeath is finished extracting any information from Mizuki, we'll know for sure. Is there a chance this Danzo is here in the city? If he is truly involved, give the order and I shall bring you his head." Raven spoke, giving a small bow of respect towards her patron. "Don't bother. Danzo is a schemer and a coward by nature. He'll try to distance himself as much as possible. Guys like him won't endanger themselves or their position unless they're forced into a corner." The blonde replied and rolled the lollipop in his mouth a bit. He then pulled it from his mouth and held the saliva-covered candy towards Raven, her eyes squinting a bit as she guessed what he wanted her to do. "I don't like candy," she grumbled, but her patron didn't seem interested in her complaints. "Indulge me," he retorted flatly, sensing that she was in no position to refuse. She leaned forward and opened her mouth and licked the candy a bit before putting it into her own mouth and began to suck. The flavor of bubble gum and Naruto's saliva teasing her taste buds. A sense of lust and humiliation bubbled inside of her as her tongue rolled around the hard candy in her mouth. After a few more moments, he pulled the candy from her mouth, a thin string of saliva connected between her lips and the candy, which broke easily when the blonde replaced the lollipop into his mouth. "You taste surprisingly delicious, Raven," he commented. A light shade of pink dusted her cheeks at the compliment. She tried to hide her emotions behind a mask of stoicism, though judging from the knowing look she was receiving, he was reading her like an open book. "Care to be my attendant for the evening, Raven?" he asked, his eyes alight with desire as his hand snaked around and squeezed her firm buttocks. She stiffened up a bit and clicked her tongue, but she could not and would not deny him. In the Brandwin tribe, strength meant everything. And Naruto was the strongest of all. He had thoroughly bested her in single combat, and even worse and more humiliating, he had spared her life. By sparing her life, he had claimed ownership of it. She belonged to him. Mind, body and soul. And so now she served him faithfully. "If it is your wish, then I shall obey," she replied flatly, making him chuckle a bit. Raven was always a tough nut to crack, and even now she was as rigid as ever. Still, in the bedroom she could easily become a whole other animal. Their little moment was interrupted as Naruto turned towards a pair of shadows who had been standing quietly in the dark. "Yes?" he asked with a raised eyebrow, prompting the two to step forward. It was the forms of the Hyuga sisters, Hinata and Hanabi, currently wearing all white yukatas with their hands concealed inside the sleeves. They both bowed towards him with the elder sister speaking, "We apologize for interrupting. Kurenai has reported that a large number of refugees have arrived at the Republic City docks. Both myself and one Isama investigated the matter and saw a number of familiar faces. It would seem that these new arrivals are from Konoha, our former village." The younger sister spoke, her eyes locked to the ground as she and her sister awaited their master's response. The blonde met in thought as he gave the lollipop in his mouth a firm suck, then muttered to himself, "First Jiraiya is spotted. Then Mizuki is found sticking his nose where it doesn't belong. And then refugees from Konoha are arriving en masse. Only explanation could be that there's a civil war happening in Konoha. And somehow both sides may have tracked me all the way here and they both want me for themselves." After a few moments of thinking, the blonde man asked, "Did you see any clan heads with the refugees?" At his question, the two sisters nodded in unison, prompting him to continue speaking. "Excellent. Set up a meeting with them. Only the clan heads may come and no one else. If anyone else comes or tries to follow, you know what to do." Once the command had been given, the sisters gave a low bow and vanished into the shadows, as if they had never been there. "Wasn't their father a clan head?" Raven asked with a raised eyebrow, making the blonde nod in confirmation. The black-haired woman couldn't help but smirk, since the sisters would be a strong incentive for their father and his clan to come beneath Naruto's umbrella, and most likely others would follow. She was certain that Ino girl was also a clan heiress just as well. Her patron was definitely a clever sort, especially when it came to getting what he wanted. "And what of this Jiraiya character? Do you think he may be hiding amongst these refugees?" she asked her boss. The blonde scratched his cheek and adopted a thinking pose, occasionally flicking the end of the lollipop stick poking from his mouth. "Doubtful. Jiraiya was spotted in the city before the refugees arrived. My guess is he piggybacked here with them most of the way, then came here ahead of them to follow through on an agenda of his own. Likely finding me. Continue the search for him, be sure to check in on brothels, bathhouses and the occasional seedy bar." Those are his favorite haunts when he's chasing tail or being a peeping Tom freak. Naruto spoke, prompting the crimson-eyed woman to nod and bow to him before she too vanished. The whiskered young man narrowed his eyes a bit at the increasingly disturbing news. Republic City was almost at the precipice of a civil war, just one more push, and the Equalists would begin their assault, and now the people from his former village were now thrown into the mix. And he strongly doubted that they were only here for shelter, it was likely they had somehow tracked him here and wanted to use him as a weapon to take back their home. Come to think of it, it was actually a miracle they hadn't found him sooner, given his reputation in Republic City. If they relied on Jiraiya for intelligence, then it was no wonder it took them so long to find him. The Toad Sannin couldn't find his own ass even if he sat on it. In any case, he was certain to know more from both Mizuki and the clan heads upon their meeting. Speaking of said meeting, back in Konoha, he was almost completely defenseless in the political realm, but now. He was the one that had the power, he was in the position of authority, and he had the power to make or break the future of the refugees. So for their sake, they had better not cross him. He had no tolerance for traitors and backstabbers anymore. After his musing was finished, he decided to retire to his chambers and await any news. If only she were at his side, to play her beloved piano and sing for him. She always brought him comfort when he needed it. He was stopped by the sight of Kurama, who had seemingly appeared out of thin air, likely having returned from her daily shenanigans. Though this time, she seemed to have a fiendish look on her face. Found him. She whispered, her tail swishing in amusement. That was it. That was all he needed to hear. It was time to deal with some unfinished business. Raven. The blonde barked, which caused the sounds of footsteps to immediately come rushing to him as she bowed and awaited his instructions. Cancel the search. Recall everyone who isn't on an essential assignment. We've got him now. Meanwhile. Korra sighed as she relaxed into the bath, enjoying the warm water washing over her athletic body. She was actually quite proud of it and took great care in it with her daily bending and martial arts training, though sometimes she wondered if any potential boyfriends would be intimidated by her somewhat muscular arms and toned abs. She shrugged off that line of thought since she didn't really have any prospective boyfriends at the moment. Naruto was definitely handsome to say the least, but she still wasn't sure what to make of him yet. She wasn't even sure if she could. The path is yours to climb. That's a pretty song. I didn't take you for a singer. Spoke the form of Jinora with a giggle, still dressed in her air nomad clothes, suggesting she wasn't here for a bath. The avatar blushed a bit, rubbing the back of her head as she answered, it's just a song I know. No idea where I got it from, but it feels special to me. Anyway, what's up? Tenzin send you here to fetch me? The young airbender giggled and shook her head, replying, actually, my father asked me to tell you that he'll be going to a council meeting, something about a swarm of refugees. So, training's cancelled for today. Jinora gave a kind smile, but noticed that Korra didn't seem very excited by the news, she seemed more interested in staring down at the water. What's wrong, Korra? Are you still upset about your lack of airbending? The young monk asked as she sat in a cross-legged position at the edge nearest to Korra, the avatar herself sighing a bit. I'm not sure, I've just had a lot on my mind lately. Not just about airbending, but the avatar mumbled and then trailed off, feeling like she needed to get something off her chest, something that she had been keeping in since she went to meet Naruto. She wanted to talk about when she almost beat a man to death, but she didn't feel comfortable with confiding in Jinora, given that she was still so young and innocent, though she was also really mature despite her age. Is it about Naruto? I've seen him meeting with my dad a few times, but I haven't spoken to him that much. What's he like? Wait, do you like him or something? Jinora asked out of simple curiosity, though Korra felt as though she'd been struck by lightning at that last question. If she were honest, she wasn't even sure how to answer. He's nice, I guess. I learned more about his past, and it sounded like he had a really horrible time. She spoke at the end hesitantly, not really wanting to share the more grisly bits. The thing is, I don't know whether or not to believe him. My head says don't, but my heart says yes. The weirdest part was that he claimed he could prove it, but he said he wouldn't. He said he wanted me to believe him, but he doesn't give me any evidence to do so. Tenzin thinks it might be some kind of test. Inora quietly listened the whole time. It did indeed seem odd for Naruto to not show this evidence, but maybe he had his reasons. It could be that maybe he is expecting something from you. Maybe he wants you to trust him first before he does the same. It could be that he is wary of other people that aren't part of his clan. If that's the case, someone must have hurt him really badly. Korra nodded absently, remembering that Naruto mentioned Sasuke's betrayal and those government officials that tried to have him killed. But surely there was more to it than that. From what she heard, he wasn't that close to Sasuke. So maybe someone hurt him on a more personal level. Could that toad guy he mentioned have something to do with it? Suddenly, the sounds of roaring and loud barking could be heard outside, followed by panicked screams. The two girls exchanged a look and nodded to one another to check it out. The avatar leapt out of the water. Jinora gave a quick gust of air to dry off the dark-skinned girl who then quickly threw on her clothes and then the two rushed outside. When they exited the bathhouse, they saw Naga who had trapped a white-haired man up a tree and was barking and snarling ferociously at him, the polar bear dog's massive paws threatening to smash it to splinters as the stranger began calling for help, clinging tightly to the treetop in terror. Korra let out a sharp whistle, calling Naga to her side. Her animal companion huffed and padded up to her, but the bear dog kept a close eye on the stranger, and from what the avatar could tell, Naga was ready to tear him open at a moment's notice. Deciding to keep her guard up for the time being, the avatar called out, "All right, get down from there. Just who are you and what are you doing here?" She crossed her arms over her chest as the stranger hesitantly descended from his perch, keeping a wary eye on the polar bear dog in case she tried to pounce him. He raised his hands up in a placating gesture and spoke, "Sorry if I scared you folks. I was looking for the master of this temple, someone called Tenzin. He's also on the city council. I was told he could get me in touch with my godson." "Your godson? I'll ask again, who are you?" the avatar demanded, this man giving her the same icky feeling as the one that she beat up outside of the casino. Only this time it was worse, much worse. She felt sick to her stomach and had to suppress the urge to vomit just from breathing the same air as him. The man made some ridiculous pose and started to shout boisterously, "I'm so glad you asked. I am the envy of men everywhere. The legendary connoisseur of females everywhere. The wise and immortal spirit, it is I. Jiraiya. The Toad Mountain Sage." At the end of his introduction, the only sounds that could be heard was the chirping of crickets and a gentle breeze flowing through the area as the girls stood unimpressed with a deadpan expression. Korra quickly stiffened up as she remembered Naruto's warning, even without it she could immediately sense that there was something off about this guy. At least she knew that this was the man that Naruto had been wary of, maybe even the real reason why he was slow to trust others. "Okay, I'll pretend I didn't hear that whole intro. Now, who's your godson? Why are you so sure that Tenzin can help you find him? Shouldn't you try going to the police if he's missing?" the avatar questioned, although she suddenly had an idea on who the godson was, she needed to confirm it. I tried the police, but that Chief Beefrong is a very intimidating woman. As soon as I asked her about my godson, she slammed the door in my face and told me to get lost. She also mentioned something about me not knowing what I'm toying around with. Jiraiya replied and then reached into his coat and pulled out a photograph of a younger Naruto, the same one as the stranger at the casino had. "This is my godson. His name is Naruto Uzumaki. A few years ago, he ran away from home and we need him back. Badly. I have tried asking around, but whenever I ask people about him or show him this picture, they all run away or ignore me entirely." He responded, his words having a similar tune towards the last stranger the avatar encountered. And once again, she could tell this man wasn't being entirely honest. Not a very surprising response since Mr. Naruto is the boss of the most powerful Yakuza clan in the city. Jinora piped in, her response earning a hearty laugh from the Toad Sage as he held his sides, almost as if they would explode from his own laughter. "Ha ha ha ha. Naruto? A Yakuza boss? Are you serious? That dumbass isn't smart enough to run anything as complex as a criminal empire. Listen, I'll level with you. Naruto is the subject of a prophecy. It is said that he will either revolutionize our homelands or bring ruin to them. And he must perform the former. If you can tell me where he is, I'd be most grateful." He spoke at the end, trying to wipe away some tears from his eyes as his laughter came to an end. "You shouldn't obsess over prophecies. They aren't always reliable and are often open to misinterpretation. And what do you mean he must perform? Shouldn't Mr. Naruto decide for himself how to handle this prophecy? If you're planning to manipulate a prophecy for your own gain, it will only end in disaster." Jinora warned him, earning a look of annoyance from the Sannin which certainly didn't go unnoticed by the girls. "I think I know more about this prophecy than you little brat." He grumbled with a sneer, his attitude making the avatar angrily clench her fist. "Hey. Don't talk to Jinora like that. If you don't like it, then you can just get lost." The avatar spoke, ready to snap her fingers and set Naga upon the man at any time. The polar bear dog herself was now letting out a low growl and bared her teeth towards the so-called sage. Before their confrontation could escalate further, a new voice spoke out, "You know, if you really wanted to find me, you could have just come to my casino. I even used the QB for inspiration to make it easy to spot. For a spy master you're really quite inept." They all turned and were met by the form of Naruto as he hopped off a boat and casually approached with his hands in his coat pockets. A large crowd of women following closely behind and then encircled the group, likely cutting off any means of escape for the Sannin. "There are a lot of familiar faces around here. Tsunade-chan. Anko-chan. So good to see you two lovely ladies again. It has been too long." he called out, singling out the two women he had always desired most, earning looks of disgust from them. Old man, it could be an eternity and still wouldn't be long enough. Naruto muttered and spat on the ground, making a quick gesture towards both the Avatar and young airbender, signaling them to step out of the enclosure. They quickly got the message and made their way outside of the ring, with Yunora deciding to sneak off and check on her family. And more importantly, keep them away in case something bad happened, while Korra decided to stay and watch what happens. You wanted to find me? Well, here I am. Normally, I'd just kill you and put you out of my misery. But given your prior history with my late father, I'll grant you a 5-minute reprieve. So say what you have to say and get it done. If you're not out of my sight when your time's up, I'll definitely kill you. Naruto spoke and gestured towards Neo, who held up a stopwatch and clicked on it, starting the timer. Naruto silently questioned himself how the Sannin ever qualified for the title of Spymaster when he couldn't even find his casino, while Mizuki succeeded in that regard. Honestly, how could Konoha even function, much less survive, with such incompetence? Jiraiya cleared his throat and spoke. Okay kid, I'll give you the rundown. After Tsunade and the others left to chase after you, there was a massive power vacuum in Konoha. 2 candidates were chosen to fill the position of Hokage, myself and Danzo Shimura. Danzo, using his connections to the civilian council, snatched the mantle from me and then turned Konoha into this massive military police state. Those of us who wanted to stay true to the original ideas of the show Daime Hokage fled, and we caught word you were living here in the city. There's some crazy talk that you're some big and bad Yakuza boss, but I didn't believe it. When the Sannin had finished speaking, he noticed that the blonde seemed more interested in cleaning out his ear with his pinky rather than actually listen, and responded, Yuha. Believe it, pervy sage. I'm kind of a big deal around here. So, you decided to come here and ask me to help out? Hard pass. You can go to hell for all I care. I'm not gonna get into a pissing match between a pair of old men over worthless ideals. Worthless ideals? Konoha is your home. It was your father's home. Your mother's home. Don't you feel like that is worth protecting? What about the people suffering under Danzo's rule? Do you have any idea what he does to people that defy him? Jiraiya almost screamed, feeling enraged by the Jinchuriki's dismissive and uncaring attitude. My father's home? Sure. My mother's home? She was only there to be a weapon. My home? Don't make me laugh. I don't owe anything to those people. And lem guess, he murders them or makes them vanish. Same old tyrannical BS. You knock one tyrant off his high horse, someone worse will his place in time. It's always been that way, always will be. In the end, none of it really matters. And last I checked, Danzo already has a foot in the grave, given how old he is. And even if he doesn't die of old age, he'll eventually be killed by someone who he's pushed over the edge. In either case, it's your problem to deal with. Not mine. Naruto spoke with a sigh. He snapped his fingers, prompting the form Shizune to rush forward with a box of lollipops. He quickly plucked an orange-colored one out and popped it into his mouth. Come on, Naruto. Please. We're desperate. You and me. We're family. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Jiraiya practically pleaded, obviously showing that he wasn't going to back down from a simple no. Off to the side, Korra watched and listened. She couldn't help but wonder why Naruto would turn a blind eye to people that were suffering. She wanted to ask him why he refused to help, but was cut off by the sound of him laughing. Us? Family? You can't be fucking serious. Should I point out that you completely neglected caring for me and didn't even bother to find a foster family to raise me? Or what about the time you tossed me off a cliff without a backup plan or safety net in case I failed to tap into my Biju chakra? And when the chips were down and the civilian council called for my execution, you could have redeemed yourself and helped me, but instead you left me to the wolves and abandoned me. Calling me a failure, saying that you couldn't control me and that I could never adhere to your peace through harmony ideals. And now here you are, thinking you can try and ask me for help. You have quite a lot of nerve. You are not family. You're just trash. And you're not welcome here in my city. However, the blonde paused at the end as he got a devious look in his eye. He pulled a kunai from his coat and tossed it at the Sannin's feet before continuing to speak. I'm not completely unreasonable. You want my help that badly? Earn it. Get down on your knees and give a heartfelt apology for everything you have done to me and all the women you have harassed over the years, then castrate yourself. Do this and I'll have Danzo killed. At his words, all of his subordinates cruelly cackled as they waited for the Sannin's response. All the while, Korra was having difficulty processing what she was hearing, but now she understood full well why Naruto carried such a powerful grudge. If this man was as awful as the village Naruto was raised in, maybe they didn't deserve to be saved. The Toad Sannin glanced between the kunai and the Jinchuriki and swallowed a thick lump in his throat and muttered, you can't be serious. Oh, I'm completely serious. It's not like you really need them. Naruto responded, then looked over towards Neo, who showed him the stopwatch which had reached the 3-minute mark. After a few more seconds of waiting, he shrugged his shoulders and snapped his fingers, prompting his subordinates to begin drawing their weapons or taking readied stances. "But you said I had 5 minutes." The Sannin exclaimed as he took a stance of his own and swallowed nervously. Dealing with Tsunade would be bad enough, but there were also a lot of women present whose abilities were unknown to him, and the ones he did know likely picked up some new tricks. The Yakuza boss raised a finger up and wagged it from side to side as he replied, I said that if you weren't out of my sight when your time runs out that I would definitely kill you. I never made any promises about my subordinates taking a crack at you. And there's a few here that have a major axe to grind with you." Naruto cackled a bit and suddenly out popped a tiny and furry shape from the insides of his coat, a small fox with 9 swishing tails. "The QP?" Jiraiya muttered in shock, the momentary distraction giving Tsunade a chance to dash forward and slammed her foot into his kneecap. There was a loud crunch sound followed by a sickening pop and finally a splash of blood as the slug Sannin had literally exploded the toad user's leg with her kick, sending him falling to the ground as his eyes rolled into his head. The sudden shock had likely caused him to pass out. Some of the ladies from Konoha giggled sadistically, ready to torture and butcher the man that had frequently harassed them, but were stopped when Naruto barked out, "Wait." They were confused as to why he had called them off and saw him looking at something. They followed his gaze and saw Pima shielding her children from the gruesome display, likely having come to investigate what was happening when she came upon the scene. "Not here. Not in front of the children." The whiskered man spoke sympathetically, prompting his subordinates to nod in agreement. They would take their pound of flesh later in a more private and controlled setting, away from prying eyes. They dragged the body of the toad user away with Tsunade, doing what she could to keep him alive. A swift death would be too great a kindness that he didn't deserve after all. Naruto then approached the avatar and got on his knees and bowed to her with his forehead touching the ground. "My sincerest apologies. I didn't wish for you to get involved in my personal affairs. But it seemed that the ghosts from my past came to haunt you anyway." Pima and her children quietly approached, with the blonde still maintaining his position. Even without looking up he spoke to the mother, "I am dearly sorry if I exposed your children to such ugliness." No. They didn't see anything. "You can get up now." "Who was that man anyway?" Pima asked and also felt a little embarrassed that the city's most powerful Yakuza boss was bowing to her. All the while Korra couldn't help but feel much the same. It would seem that Naruto was indeed a caring and compassionate person at times. Only a good and decent person would try to avoid exposing children to such violence. She actually thought he would have done anything to see that man dead, but it seems he wasn't a monster at all. For a moment she almost felt her heart skip a beat as she thought about the kind gesture. "Well, Ms. Pima, that wasn't actually a man. It was actually vermin that wears the skin of a man. He won't be a problem for you anymore. Once again, I am sorry for any trouble my personal business may have brought to you." He apologized once more as he got up, his furry companion using her tails to brush off his clothes. "It's so fluffy." "What is that?" Milo shouted excitedly as he pointed up towards Kurama. He seemed almost ready to pounce up and try to grab her, but a firm hand on his shoulder, courtesy of Pima, stopped him. Naruto chuckled a bit at the boy's behavior and replied, "This is Kurama. One of my oldest and dearest friends and has been a mother figure with me since my birth. Mom was indisposed at the time. She is actually a kitsune. Many stories depict kitsunes as tricksters, loyal guides, and lifelong companions. And Kurama. She has always been there for me since the day I was born." The little fox made a small giggle and bowed, then she nuzzled the blonde's face. Naga patted up and sniffed at the little fox and the blonde, then licked the both of them and also nuzzled the blonde as well. "Wow, I've never seen Naga warm up to a stranger so quickly before," the avatar commented with a small smile. "It is said that animals can sense the inherent goodness or evil in a person," Jinora stated in a matter-of-fact tone. "Boss Naruto, would you consider joining our family for dinner? I think we should thank you for your help." Pima offered with a smile, the Yakuza boss giving a bow of appreciation. "I'd be honored. Plus there's a few things I wish to talk about with Avatar Korra." "Neo." The Jinchuriki called out and almost immediately the parasol user had appeared. Were all of his people so prompt when he called for them? "Tell the others to go on ahead without me. I'll be hanging around here for a while. You have a case of medicine for me?" he asked, prompting Neo to nod with a smile and handed him one of the boxes that contained those lollipops he was always sucking on. Wait, they were actually medicine. He accepted the box and gave a quick kiss on her cheek before Neo departed with a spring in her step. Naruto gave the orange-flavored candy in his mouth a quick suck as he pocketed the box. "Come on Korra. Let's talk. Kurama. You have fun with the kids and don't play too rough with them." He spoke with a chuckle, prompting the kitsune to give a salute and hop off his shoulder. When she landed on the ground she made her tails extend forwards and began to tickle the children, leaving them rolling on the ground in laughter as both the Yakuza and Avatar walked off to a more secluded area. Korra pursed her lips as silence fell between them. She wasn't sure how to begin whatever conversation that they were about to have. But she could see in Naruto's eyes the turmoil he was experiencing. He was hurting on the inside. He may have acted like he didn't care, but he was still in pain from his past. You want to talk about what happened? I know you didn't tell me everything, but I'll listen if you just want to vent everything out. She offered with a kind smile. I tried. I honestly tried to put my past behind me. But I also knew that sooner or later, it would come back to haunt me and the people I cared about. You have no idea what they did to me. I was kicked out of the orphanage when I was 5, I had to live in a dingy apartment with Kurama as my only companion. Parents would keep their children away from me, stores would sell me expired goods or unfairly adjust prices. Teachers would neglect me and let me flounder in failing grades. Even some of the people I thought I could count on betrayed me to some degree or other. And all because of something that wasn't mine or Kurama's fault. He spoke in a mixture of anger, resentment and pain. For the first time since she'd met him, he had finally let down his walls and showed a more vulnerable side. What happened? She asked him, hoping to understand him better. For some reason, seeing him like this, it made her heart ache for him as tears of her own welled up in her eyes. Kurama is no ordinary kitsune. She's actually an entity called a Biju. One in a set of 9 others. The Biju are powerful beings that are all sealed away into humans who become dubbed as Jinchuriki, walking prisons for the Biju that can use their destructive powers and are used as weapons of mass destruction. Entire wars have been fought in my homelands over the Biju and other destructive powers. My mom was Kurama's previous host, but her seal became weak on the night of my birth. A man came and held me hostage, he kidnapped my mother and forcefully broke the seal and forced Kurama to attack the village. My father sacrificed his life to safely seal her into me, and my mother was taken prisoner and kept in a medically induced coma by an old enemy of hers. And for the entirety of my life, all I was to the village was a weapon. But there were some people that showed me kindness and compassion, that didn't see me as a weapon or a reminder of the people that died when Kurama went berserk. And most of those same people now work for me. They have always been there for me. And they followed me even after my banishment, which was the best thing to ever happen to me. After I was banished, I was free. I could go where I wanted. Be who I wanted. No one could tell me what to do or how I should act. After a while I met my first love, my first wife, my first everything. She was always so good to me, always put up with my mood swings and emotional baggage. She always knew how to calm me or cheer me up. The piano you saw. She would spend hours playing it for me and sing to me. And then she was taken from me. As she listened to his story, Korra was moved to tears, unable to understand how an entire village could be so cruel to a single child. And when he had found some form of happiness, it was snatched away from him. How? How did she die? She asked, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. She didn't. She was taken. But she's still out there, somewhere. I had made a special device to help keep her safe, but it was destroyed, and I am unsure how to bring her back to me. But I know for sure she's not completely gone. He answered, his hand touching her own which felt surprisingly warm. Who took her from you? She asked him, a large part of her wanting to find this person and bring him to justice. She was only met with silence, signaling that he didn't want to talk about it. Guess she had to expect that since it was undoubtedly a touchy subject for him. I know I'm not your wife, but would it help any if I sang? She offered, hoping to bring him at least a little comfort. That would actually mean a lot. He responded tearfully, prompting the avatar to nod as she began to sing for him. You're the ocean's grey waves, destined to seek life beyond the shore just out of reach. Yet the waters ever change, flowing like time. The path is yours to climb. In the white light, a hand reaches through. The double-edged blade cuts your heart in two. Waking dreams fade away. Embrace the brand new day. When she stopped, she noticed the waters of the bay shimmered and glowed, the water seemingly dancing and tuned to her voice, and just as mysteriously as it started, it stopped in almost an instant. Thank you, Korra. Naruto spoke with a warm smile stretching across his face that made her heart stop for a moment. Without even thinking she leaned in closer, pulling the lollipop from his mouth and placed her lips against his own. His mouth tasted much like sugary sweetness, ramen, and at the current moment oranges. She quickly broke off the kiss and blushed, unsure of what came over her. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. Especially since you're married. She muttered in shame, feeling she had just disgraced herself and the memory of Naruto's wife. But instead he smiled and hugged her close. Another thing my wife accepted of me was my need for multiple wives. Due to certain obligations to my clan and for medical reasons I require the companionship of multiple women. In short, I'm a polygamist. Naruto replied as he released her from the hug, rubbing his head in slight embarrassment at the fact. Wait, you have multiple wives. And they're all okay with that? I'm not an expert on relationships, but I don't see how that can possibly work. Korra responded, trying her best to hide her shock at this fact. But then, in certain parts of the world, maybe even in Naruto's homeland, polygamy was a more common occurrence and was thus more accepted. It's hard sometimes. The girls all have different personalities that occasionally clash, but I have done well to help keep the peace. Instead of viewing it as a competition for my attention, they view it as an opportunity to shower me with all the love, attention and affection I had been previously starved of. They also view each other as sisters in arms. He explained with a chuckle, making the avatar shrug her shoulders since she could only take him at his word. If such a relationship worked out for him and all the girls were okay with it, then she didn't see any real harm. They drifted into a comfortable silence, her hand in his as their fingers laced together. After a few moments she spoke to him. Wherever your lost wife is, I'll help you find her. I promise. He nodded in thanks and replied, whatever you need Korra, I'll be there to help you. We'll protect this city and our friends and our families together. I promise. Once he had finished speaking, he glanced over towards the harbor of the city. And knew full well that the next few days would be absolutely critical. Meanwhile, Republic City Harbor. Everyone accounted for. Spoke the form of Kakashi Hatake with a tired sigh, weeks spent on the road and on boats, having taken their toll on him and all the other refugees from Konoha. To think all it took for their beloved village to fall apart was the greed of a few civilians and the dark ambition of an old man. How low they had fallen. Everyone except Jiraiya. The troublesome bastard. Shikaku grumbled, making the masked Jonin sigh, knowing full well that Jiraiya was likely pursuing his own agenda rather than fulfill his duties to the people of their village. The whole time they had traveled together, the old Sannin wouldn't shut up about the fact that they needed Naruto, that he was the only one that could help them, the only one who could restore their village to greatness and blah blah blah. The village was just that, a village. Just a collection of empty buildings. What really mattered was the people. Those who willingly stayed subjected themselves to the service of a warmonger. Those who fled wanted a new home to live freely and happily, and right now, the only ones who mattered were the latter. For all Kakashi cared, Konoha could burn. It was now a shadow of its former self and a mockery of the dead ideals and principles it was founded on. His musing was broken when he heard the sound of surprised gasps, prompting him to look up and see the forms of the Hyuga sisters who had vanished to follow Naruto. If they were here, he couldn't be far behind. Hinata. Hanabi. It's good to see some familiar faces. The Jonin spoke and gave a friendly wave. At that, Hiashi Hyuga lunged out from the crowd and warmly embraced the two, tears leaking from his eyes, showing how much he had missed his daughters. They returned the embrace for a brief moment, then broke it off and took a step back, keeping their hands hidden in their sleeves as they gave a respectful bow, with their father returning the gesture as though they had come to a silent understanding. Our patron Naruto-sama bids you welcome to his city. He wishes to negotiate with any clan heads available. Hinata spoke in a professional tone, her father giving a small smile, as if he were proud of the woman she had become. There shall be a meeting tomorrow night. We shall come to collect you. Clan heads only, and no one else is to come. Hanabi spoke in the same professional tone. Kakashi cleared his throat and spoke in a polite tone. I'm no clan head, but I'm kin to the closest thing to a leader the refugees have, clans included. So I guess that makes me an unofficial Hokage. Would it be acceptable for me to come as well? The two sisters exchanged a glance between each other, as if having a silent conversation, they then nodded and walked away in silence. As they vanished into the crowd, all the while Kakashi couldn't help but feel a little nervous. He could only hope that Naruto was feeling generous in negotiations. What's going on? Where am I? Korra muttered as her eyes fluttered open and she found herself in unfamiliar surroundings. From what she could tell, she was in a very long hallway with black and white checkered tiles stretching on and on as far as the eye could see. She tried to get up but found herself strapped to a wheelchair, her arms trapped inside a straitjacket as she tried to wiggle them free. What was this place? Some kind of mental asylum? How did she even end up here? Hello? A little help please. I think there's some kind of mistake here. She called out, chuckling nervously and hoped that this was some kind of a joke, but something in her gut told her it wasn't. Her ears perked up when she heard the sounds of liquid splashing and saw a figure far down the hallway approaching her. As it got closer, she squinted her eyes a bit to get a better look, then they widened in surprise as she saw it. The figure seemed to be shaped like a female humanoid, but its body was entirely composed of black ink. It had no distinctive features to identify it, and despite its lack of eyes the avatar knew that it was indeed watching her. Who or what are you? What do you want with me? What is this place? She asked it, feeling much afraid because of this alien creature. It only continued staring at her and tilted its head to the side. Growing frustrated, Korra roared angrily as she tried to bend some flames towards the figure, but nothing emerged from her mouth. The figure's body language changed as though it were laughing at her. It wagged a finger from side to side and then brought it up to its head and drew a smiley face where the mouth region would be. It then reached inside of its belly and pulled something out. It appeared to be some kind of orb made of gold, but it seemed to be heavily damaged, but she could still make out an inscription. Her name was on it. Before she could question the strange entity, she heard something like a waterfall. She then saw a tidal wave of ink come flooding down the hall. She screamed in fear and began desperately struggling to free herself from her bonds, but it was too late as the black liquid washed over her and carried her away. Korra was now trapped in nothing but darkness, unable to see, unable to hear, and perhaps most importantly unable to breathe. She shut her eyes, praying that this would come to an end, and then when she opened them again, she found herself standing in the middle of a ballroom. She looked around for a few moments and couldn't help cringe in disgust at the heavy amount of dust and cobwebs. It was obvious this place had been neglected and abandoned. A spotlight clicked on and shined on her as a strange song she hadn't heard began to play. Play We Three by the Ink Spots. She heard the footsteps of the ink-like creature approaching her with that same unsettling smiley face. But then it shifted into a frown as what appeared to be tear tracks seemed to trail down along its cheeks. The avatar felt a sense of pity for the creature and wondered if it was trying to communicate something to her. Hello? Are you some kind of a spirit? Please, talk to me. Maybe I can help you. She spoke, trying to reason with it, but it raised a lone finger to its frowny face and made a shush gesture, then pointed up towards the ceiling, then put a hand to its ear region. The song? Is it supposed to mean something? Korra asked as she listened to the lyrics carefully but was surprised when the ink creature then hugged her, its liquid body squishing against her making her get a squeamish feeling, but she didn't resist it. It then broke the embrace and took her hand as it guided her into a gentle waltz as the music played on. The avatar wasn't sure what to make of this, but she decided to play along. She could sense that this entity was trying to tell her something, but it likely didn't know how to properly convey the message. The entity then stopped their brief dance and gave a small curtsy. Spirit? What are you trying to tell me? She asked it once more, but the entity melted into a puddle of goop at her feet and vanished out of existence. End song. Wait. Don't go. Korra called out, trying to bring the creature back, but it was already too late. Suddenly there was a loud boom, followed by another and another, like the thunderous banging of drums, and then came the loud screeching of pipes playing that forced the avatar to clap her hands over her ears to drown out the noise. She felt like her head would crack open from the noise as she slowly sank to her knees. Please stop it. Stop it. Stop the noise. Naruto. Naruto. Please help me. Naruto. She screamed out for help, hoping and praying that this nightmare would end. And just like that the noise stopped as a figure stood over her, holding out his hand. It was Naruto himself who was smiling down at her. She took his hand as he pulled her back to her feet. He then frowned a bit and spoke. I'm sorry, but you're not ready. She tilted her head in confusion and asked him ready for what? The whiskered man chuckled in response and snapped his fingers and all faded to black. Korra's eyes snapped open as she found herself staring up at the ceiling of her bedroom, her body soaked in enough sweat that her sheet was sticking to her body. She groaned in disgust and tossed her sheet aside, deciding to wash her face as she rubbed some of the sleepiness from her eyes and muttered to herself, just a dream. Just a dream. She sighed as she turned on the faucet and splashed some water in her face as she tried to sort through what just happened. She kept on trying to tell herself it was just a dream, but she couldn't shake the feeling there was more to it than that. And that song, was there a message to it as well? And why was she dreaming about Naruto? Then again, after that moment with the kiss and singing for him, it was very difficult getting him off of her mind. Sighing to herself, she just wanted to go back to sleep. She glanced out her window and saw Naruto's casino across the bay, a small twinge of worry worming in her heart since he seemed quite emotional before. Emotional enough that he let down a number of walls and opened up to her. Maybe she would check in on him after training. She hoped that somehow she could help him find his lost wife. She couldn't imagine how it must feel to be separated from someone you loved. And there was no room for doubt that he was still in pain. If anything else, he could probably use a friend. Meanwhile, Jiraiya whimpered fearfully, his remaining limbs and his head strapped firmly to some kind of operating table as opera music played on a phonograph in the corner. He couldn't move his head and was forced to stare up to the ceiling where blinding lights shined down on him, and most unfortunately, he couldn't even shut his eyes to block out the lights since his eyelids were being forcibly kept open. From what little he could tell, he was definitely underground, and with the scent of blood in the air, he could only surmise he was in some kind of torture chamber. Evening, pervy sage. Are you comfortable? No. Excellent. Spoke the mocking voice of Naruto, who approached the operating table. The Sandin swallowed hard as he wondered what the Jinchuriki had in store for him. It couldn't possibly be anything good. I'm curious. Have you ever been to an opera? The blonde asked seemingly at random, making the toad user give a confused wah. To which the blonde replied, I suppose a swine like you wouldn't know anything about the arts or culture. Operas aren't really my thing, but there was one particular opera that spoke to me. Have you ever heard of Don Giovanni? What the hell's your point? Do I look like I study that kind of crap? Jiraiya snapped angrily, a part of him wanting to get this farce over with. Was Naruto just trying to drag this out for his own amusement? But at the same time he knew he needed to find a means of escape, no matter how futile it may be. Don Giovanni is about a man who is a womanizer, a rapist, and a murderer who does as he pleases without care or consequence. Eventually his sins begin to catch up to him, and when he refuses to repent for his sins, he is dragged to the depths of hell by a pack of demons. If you had repented earlier and castrated yourself when I gave you the chance, I might have been able to forgive you. Even if you tried to force me into a life of chains. Naruto spoke with a dry chuckle. So I'm Don Giovanni? Hahaha. Good joke. Hilarious. I saw the QP earlier. How did you break the seal? The Sannin demanded, believing the blonde Uzumaki to be insane for releasing the Biju. I never broke the seal. Didn't have to. Her real body is safely tucked away inside me, what you saw was a blood clone she is inhabiting. Unfortunately, without a conscious mind in the seal to regulate the flow of Biju chakra, I run a much higher risk of accidentally losing control of it, and with it my temper. Fortunately I have a means to make up for that little bump, a special medicine that helps stabilize the Biju chakra, constantly pumping through my body, which is in the form of very delicious lollipops. But I digress. The blonde spoke, who currently had a blueberry-flavored lollipop in his mouth. Naruto. Come on. We can talk about this. Think about what your father would want. Jiraiya shouted, trying to reason with the Yakuza boss who was utterly unmoved by the mentioning of his father. Why should I care about what a dead man wants? The whiskered man replied with a snarky tone and a cold and humorless laugh as he continued, it doesn't matter. Nothing really matters except for my family, their safety and happiness. Not that you would understand anything about family. The Sannin desperately wanted to turn his head so he could try and spit at the little brat, so instead he spoke, "Aw, shut up. Good luck surviving with all of the shinobi nations after you. Danzo will hunt you to the ends of the world unless we put an end to him." His naive statement earned a loud laugh from the Uzumaki who found those words completely ridiculous. I'm pretty sure that warmonger Danzo has much bigger things to worry about than me. If I know him, or at the very least his character and reputation, I am more than certain the other shinobi nations will be more than happy to take care of him for me. No one likes a warmongering dictator that kidnaps and brainwashes children into emotionless drones. At any rate, it's been fun, but I have more important things to do like get a spot treatment from Tsunade and Shizune. My dear friend Anko will be along to take the utmost care of you. Sayonara. Oh, and, is there anything you want me to tell your friends? The blonde asked at the end with a casual grin. Please Kami, help me. Jiraiya muttered, fearing whatever torture that Anko slut would do to him. But there was no room for doubt she was likely going to do something nasty to his genitals. The Yakuza boss shrugged as he walked away with his hands clasped behind his back, very eager for an acupuncture session to help relieve his stress. When he exited the chamber, he was greeted by the form of Anko, who seemed extremely excited to begin torturing that damn toad sage. Hey Naruto-sama. Got some news for you. Meetings being set up for our old friends from Konoha. The Hyuga sisters report that they'll all be attending, including Kakashi who's the unofficial Hokage. She spoke as she walked alongside him, the young man scratching his cheek with a small smile as he listened to her. That's fine. I have no issue with that. Anything about the Equalists? And has the good general extracted anything useful from my old friend Mizuki? He asked as he gave the lollipop in his mouth a firm suck, hoping to hear something juicy. Nothing going on with the Equalists, our friend says they're just waiting for Amon to give the green light. Best guess. This is the calm before the story. As for Mizuki, what he's told we pretty much already heard from Jiraiya, though he did give some bits of good info. With the instability of Konoha, all of the other nations are preparing to bull rush the village and conquer it. Danzo rekindled his alliance with Orochimaru to try and keep back the building forces against them. And most disturbingly, they're trying to create a new Uchiha. She reported that last piece, making his eyes flare red for a brief second before changing back to their usual blue. What was that last bit? He asked, very sincerely hoping that he had misheard her. The snake user sighed as she rubbed the back of her head and explained, after you killed Sasuke, there's obviously no viable Uchiha males to recreate the clan and provide the Sharingan, which was a major blow to Konoha's reputation. Which was further worsened when the civilian council attempted to execute you for doing your job. So Danzo and Orochimaru are using Sasuke's DNA to try and make a new generation of Uchihas. one's programmed for loyalty. I'm guessing that old snake in the grass plans to use one as a vessel to get a Sharingan, which was likely part of whatever deal they made. When she had finished her report, the blonde rolled the lollipop stick in his mouth as he thought on her words. That's perturbing news. But I think we may not need to worry, not even Danzo and Orochimaru, together with all their scheming, can take on the entirety of the nations. But enough about that, how fair is that project I assigned to Gaia, Kali, Nico and Madonna? The blonde asked at the end, eagerly hoping that they had found what he requested. Still a work in progress. But they think they're making progress. The locations of what you seek is extremely isolated, but not unreachable if they know where to look. The dango lover replied with a smirk, giving him a reassuring wink. Understood. Let me know when they find their objectives. Naruto requested, earning a nod from Anko as she kissed him on the cheek, prompting him to return the gesture by removing the medicinal candy from his mouth and kissing her own cheek. But that done, Anko turned on her heel to head towards Jiraiya's chamber. She was going to spend a long time torturing that pervert for all the years he spent sexually harassing her and her friends. A small sense of giddiness filled the blonde. For the time being, everything was going according to his plans, or at least things were simply going his way. Just the way he liked it. The only thing missing that could truly bring him happiness was to see his family complete once more. The following morning. Air Temple Island. Korra yawned tiredly as she stretched her limbs, eager to renew her training in airbending, desperately hoping she could get over her block. Tenzin and Jinora stood at the ready, the former seeming rather stiff and pensive, likely having heard of the incident yesterday and from his meeting with the city council that went in a predictably roundabout fashion when discussing the refugees. However, he was pleased to know that no one on the island was harmed, excluding this Jiraiya character he'd heard about. All set to go, Korra? Tenzin asked patiently with the avatar finishing her stretches and gave a nod of confirmation. But then she raised up a lone finger and spoke, there is one more thing. I actually had this dream last night. At that, the monks gained looks of curiosity and as they gestured for Korra to explain since it could be something of importance. They were certain that Korra wouldn't have brought it up otherwise. Minutes passed as she explained to them the contents of her dream, with Jinora making a thinking pose and Tenzin stroking his beard. When she had finished, the bearded monk spoke, that is quite a dream. This ink-like spirit you encountered is possibly the same one that first contacted you before and sent you that vision. And once again, Naruto seems to be involved in it somehow. That's what I figured too. I just wish I knew what it was trying to tell me. Korra said with a sigh, scratching the back of her head, feeling a sense of frustration that she still couldn't connect with the spiritual side of being the avatar. Perhaps more will be revealed later. This dream may be a sign that your connection with this spirit is getting stronger. It may show something more clear on its next attempt. Jinora spoke reassuringly, her father nodding in agreement with her assessment, and the avatar smiled a bit since that was probably true. Yeah, you're probably right. So what exercise are we gonna do today? I think I got the spinning gates mastered, I can even do it without the need of a blindfold. Korra spoke in a more perky voice, eager to move on to something else and attempt to break through whatever barrier was keeping her from airbending. Today we'll be doing something a bit more straightforward. Jinora suggested this exercise a while ago, so this will be the first time we've actually tried it. Tenzin spoke, prompting the avatar to tilt her head and wonder what she was about to be put through. A few minutes later they came to a dojo that had reinforced walls. A cannon was brought out with several crates of rubber balls next to it. This exercise isn't exactly a traditional method of airbending training, but it does fit the base principles of the air nomads. The goal is simple, you simply need to avoid being hit by the balls fired at you. They're soft enough to not cause any real damage, but hard enough to leave a few bruises, so be careful and watch out for any balls that may bounce off the walls. We'll base your score based on how many times you get hit. Tenzin explained as a few monks turned on the machine and prepared to dump the balls into a large funnel on the back. Meanwhile, Korra put on some protective gear such as a vest and helmet to protect herself, going for something a bit more modern. Alright then. Give me your best shot. The avatar spoke confidently as she adopted a martial arts stance, her confidence quickly draining away when she saw the monks preparing to dump the whole crate down the funnel. Wait. Not all at once. Tenzin called out, having forgotten to instruct the monks to only toss in a handful at a time, but it was too late as the machine loudly whirred and started to rapidly fire off numerous balls, making a popping sound each time it fired. For Korra, time seemed to slow as she saw the balls racing towards her, and she felt as if she could sense their pathways. Her eyes glowed a bright blue for a moment as she closed her eyes. Even with them closed she could still clearly see in what direction the balls would go. She trusted her body's instincts as she did with the gates and smoothly dodged the incoming projectiles. The balls that passed her by began to wildly bounce off the floor, ceiling and walls in all directions, making Tenzin realize that this should be a master-level exercise. He was certain even the best airbender would be hard-pressed to avoid every single ball. He was amazed as the avatar seemed to dance through the gauntlet of projectiles, performing splits, cartwheels, leaps and numerous other acrobatics he didn't know she could perform. Even more amazing was the fact that he was certain without doubt that not a single ball had made contact with her. The cannon began to slow as it rapidly depleted its ammo, and with one last pop it fired a final ball that raced towards Korra. She held out an open palm and caught it with ease. When she opened her eyes, she seemed surprised by the number of balls that now littered the floor. "So how'd I do? Does the one I caught count as being it or not?" Korra asked with a smile. She wasn't entirely sure how she did it, but she felt as if this was familiar to her. "How did you do? How did you do? How did you do?" That was utterly sensational. Amazing. Astonishing. You moved like a master airbender. You performed with utter perfection. Tenzin shouted in utter awe and wonder, quickly clapping his hands to congratulate the avatar, with his daughter and the other monks joining in as well. "I don't know how to explain it. I just knew where they were going and how to move. Felt like I'd done it a million times." Korra spoke as she dropped the ball she had caught and approached her master, giving a small bow of thanks since that was quite the experience. She actually didn't think she'd do that well, scratch that, she didn't believe she would get it so perfectly on the first try. "This could be a major step in your airbending. We may need to try other exercises to see if you can achieve such results." Tenzin spoke proudly, getting a strong feeling that perhaps his student was making significant progress in her training. This could even be her big break. "Bring it on. I'll take whatever you can throw." Korra spoke giddily and then cut herself short as she sensed something off. She looked past the group of monks and could feel something hiding in the bushes outside of the building. It felt empty and hollow, which sent a chill down her spine. She then stomped her foot and used earthbending to make the aura sink into the ground. She then rushed outside to investigate what it was she sensed. Tenzin and Jinoric asked after her, asking what was wrong, but then they stopped when they saw someone wearing a blank mask buried neck deep in the ground through earthbending. "Who the hell are you? Why were you creeping around here?" Korra demanded as she removed the mask to look the stranger in the eye. She paused as she saw no flicker of emotion in his eyes, there was nothing but emptiness in them. "How did you know he was there, Korra?" Jinora asked, while her father was wondering the same thing. Although he was considering asking for more White Lotus entries for security reasons, since there seemed to be an unusually high number of intruders sneaking into his home. "I dunno. I just knew he was there." Korra replied since she didn't know how to properly explain it. She then kicked the stranger in the face and angrily demanded, "Answer me." The intruder didn't even react to the blow and just stared blankly at them. She honestly wasn't sure if he was deaf or mute, but it didn't seem like he would be talking. And that creepy blank stare was giving her the chills. She looked at the mask in her hand, it seemed utterly unremarkable. Just a blank mask except for one thing, there was a kanji for rude on the forehead region. Pursing her lips for a second she then spoke, "I think we should call Naruto." Tenzin seemed confused by her suggestion and asked why not call the police. "We can let Chief Bifeng deal with this intruder." "Come on Tenzin. First that toad sage showed up and now this guy. There's gotta be a connection. And I think Naruto may have some answers, if not, then we can go to the cops." "Okay." The avatar suggested, offering a compromise. She also made a valid point, 2 intruders back to back couldn't possibly be a coincidence. The air nomad reluctantly nodded in agreement, it was time to make a phone call. Meanwhile, Naruto sat in quiet meditation on the roof of his penthouse after enjoying a very enjoyable acupuncture and massage session. With his body relaxed, it was now time to relax his mind. He could easily sense it, somewhere out there, his missing wife was waiting for him. Lost but not gone, and she was waiting for her moment to return to him. And this brought him comfort, especially after his previous failure to protect her. He sighed and quietly told himself that what happened wasn't his fault as he slowly cleared the chakras in his body and mind. He was interrupted when he sensed the presence of someone approaching. "Yes, Kurenai. I hope it is good news." Naruto spoke, feeling slightly irritated that he was being interrupted. No rest for the weary or the wicked, he supposed. "Not good. But not bad." Councilman Tenzin and Avatar Korra called. Another intruder on Air Temple Island wearing a blank mask with the kanji for rude. She spoke in an even tone, prompting the Jinchuriki's eyes to snap open, a low growl escaping his lips. So Mizuki wasn't the only one Danzo sent. "I should have known. Bring them here at once," he ordered, prompting the Gain Jutsu mistress to bow as she went off to arrange the needed transportation. "I suppose this is what happens when you try and break certain rules, they'll try to break you," the blonde muttered as he got up from his seat, cracking his neck. A tiny smirk on his face as he muttered, "Welp, the gods don't show favor to quitters. Bring it on Warhawk, I'm ready for whatever send my way." But that said, the blonde descended down to his office to await the arrival of his guests. Minutes later the forms of Korra and Tenzin appeared, the former using her earthbending to move the prisoner who was currently encased in a block of stone. "Tenzin, Korra. Welcome. Welcome to my humble abode. Can I get you anything? Something to drink or munch on? The Yakuza boss offered politely since he was nothing if not a good host for his guests. No thanks. You can start with this creep. Korra muttered as she pointed towards the prisoner who was now staring blankly at the Jinchuriki. All Naruto had to do was take one glance at the man and speak. His face is unfamiliar to me. But that is quite familiar. He spoke at the end while pointing towards the mask that Tenzin was currently holding. So you know of its significance? Tenzin asked, extending his arm towards the Uzumaki as he presented the mask. The blond man accepted it with a rueful smile. Unfortunately, yes. In my homelands, we have a relatively simple ranking system. One of the more advanced ranks being Anbu level. They're the kinds of ninjas that handle the off-the-books type of assignment such as assassination, spying, sabotage, and guarding HVIs, such as their village leader or other assets. One particular subdivision to it a step further. This subdivision was known as Root, headed by a man named Danzo Shimura. Naruto explained, placing the mask on a nearby table as he dived behind a minibar to fetch some much-needed booze. I remember that name. That Jiraiya guy you captured mentioned him. Korra pointed out, making the blonde mumble a quick yep as he reappeared with a bottle of alcohol and popped it open before taking a swig from it. Danzo is a man with no sense of due process or ethics. He believes that the perfect ninja is one without emotions. In his Root division, recruits are mentally conditioned and brainwashed to make them incapable of feeling any emotion whatsoever, leaving them little more than hollow dolls of flesh that mindlessly obey his commands. Incapable of independent thought. Supposedly, Root was shut down years ago, but rumors persisted that they continued to operate, but no evidence supported these rumors. And naturally, due to a lack of evidence, Danzo avoided jail time. Kinda funny how the law works, doesn't it? A man can serve hard time simply possessing questionable items, but those who commit far worse crimes get away with it and are capable of continuing their crimes. Naruto muttered at the end disdainfully as he took another swig of booze. Barbarian. Tenzin muttered in disgust, now understanding why their prisoner was the way he was. These Root Anbu weren't just robbed of their emotions, they were little more than broken shells. Any sense of morality or essence of a soul gone forever. Too kind of a word to describe people like him. Humans can be such vile creatures. Naruto muttered as he tapped a finger against the neck of the bottle in his hand, his words earning a look of confusion from the avatar. What was that last bit? I didn't catch that. She spoke since she didn't fully hear him. The blonde shrugged his shoulders as he exited the minibar and sighed as he drank some more. Never mind that. At any rate, I'll inform Chief Bifrong to keep an eye out for anyone suspicious. One of the major weaknesses of these schmucks is their lack of self-preservation instincts and sense of caution. They'll stick out like sore thumbs. Naruto spoke as he snapped his fingers and called out for Neo. The pink and brown-haired girl seemingly floated down gracefully like a certain magical nanny with her parasol and landed next to the blonde. He leaned close to her and whispered something in her ear, making her nod to his instructions. She then gave him a quick peck on the cheek and then marched off. We'll take the paperweight off your hands. And Korra. I really appreciate what you did for me last night. In fact, I have something for you as a small thanks. Naruto spoke with a warm smile. He then clapped his hands together and like magic a large folder appeared in his hands, making both the avatar and monk wonder where he had pulled it from to pull off that trick. Korra accepted it and opened it, revealing both some kind of musical record and a ticket for a pro bending match tomorrow. She smiled happily at the gift since she'd always wanted to see a match for herself and it would be nice to have some music to listen to in her room. Thank you. I appreciate it and that you opened up to me yesterday, but what happened to trust is earned, not given? She asked at the end, throwing his own words into his face. The Yakuza boss chuckled a bit. There's carelessly giving trust to random people. And then there's choosing to take a leap of faith on a friend. The blonde replied with a somewhat snarky expression and then glanced over towards a nearby clock, prompting him to say, as pleasant as it is to see you both, I'm afraid I have a pressing engagement. My people will see to it that you're escorted home. One more thing. Why was this Anbu fellow snooping around Air Temple Island of all places? Korra asked with a raised eyebrow. There'd be a number of reasons. Getting a lay of the land, spying on Tenzin who is a council member. Things like that. Be sure to keep an eye out for any more of these guys. Naruto spoke, giving them a friendly warning to which they nodded in understanding and appreciation. With that, both Tenzin and Korra departed, the former wondering what Korra did for the Yakuza boss, but he decided to save it for later. He was more concerned with acquiring more White Lotus guards in case any more of these dolls showed up. He wasn't about to put his family or the avatar in any unnecessary danger. Later, evening time. Kakashi and the clan head sighed in the back of a moving vehicle as they were driven to the meeting point. However, judging from the number of times the car turned, it was like it was going in circles. Without a doubt it was a security measure to lose any potential tails, since it was mentioned that a root agent had recently been captured. Was Root looking for them, for Naruto, or was he simply scouting the city and landscape? Most likely all three. At long last their transportation came to a halt, the back of the delivery van they were in opened up, and then some kind of garage door was lifted open, revealing that the meeting place was some kind of warehouse. When they exited the van they found Tsunade standing near a set of folding chairs waiting for them, along with the Hyuga sisters. The two sisters nodded to their father, who also returned the gesture with a barely seen smile. "Lady and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Have a seat, sorry for the low-key venue, but we wanted to ensure privacy." The former Gondime greeted, none of her former followers voicing any complaints, since the place seemed fairly secure. The Ashi flashed his Byakugan for a brief moment but couldn't see anything outside of the building. No doubt there must have been a number of security seals placed to ensure that no spies or intruders could sneak up on them. "Tsunade-sama, good to see you again." Kakashi politely greeted, causing the slug Sannin to give a soft smile. "You don't have to call me Sama. I abandoned the Hokage position years ago." She spoke with a sigh and crossed her arms beneath her impressive bust. Tsume scratched the side of her head and said, "We don't blame you for that. We all knew you pretty much came for the pup's sake. And given that farce with the Uchiha's death, you had every right to abandon the village. Just as we all had to. Konoha isn't Konoha anymore. Maybe it hasn't been for decades." At her words, the other clan heads and Kakashi murmured their agreement. After their brief conversation, an imposing woman with black hair and crimson eyes appeared. At first they almost mistook her for Kurenai, but were corrected when Tsunade spoke. "Everyone, meet Raven Branwen, one of Boss Naruto's top bodyguards and enforcers." Raven nodded and announced, "Boss Naruto is ready to speak with you now." At her words, a shadow seemingly emerged revealing Naruto himself, casually sucking on a lollipop as he approached. "Nice to see some friendly faces that don't make me want to puke." Jiraiya says, "Please Kami, help me." The blonde spoke with a chuckle, his words confirming what the ex-Konoha ninjas had suspected all along. Jiraiya went after Naruto and got himself captured. Not that they honestly cared anymore after having to deal with his attempts at fooling around with the women of their clans and their need for keeping the peace on the road. "Pardon my asking, but where is my daughter Ino?" The Yamanaka head, Inoichi, asked since it had been years since he saw his daughter. The last time he saw her was when she proclaimed that the village was rotten to the core if ninjas are being punished for doing their jobs and decided to travel with Tsunade to keep on learning from her, likely also following Naruto in the process. She's currently mind scanning the root Anbu that was captured. He may not be talkative, but that brain of his still functions to a degree. Gotta be something useful in there. Naruto replied, causing Inoichi to nod in understanding, grateful his daughter was okay. He would need to speak to her later on. A few of the clan heads began to sit down in the chairs, while all the rest chose to stand as Naruto spoke. "I'll get straight to the point. You need to find homes and jobs for your people, and Danzo is likely hunting us all down, or at least keep tabs on us. Republic City is in a pretty fragile state, so it will be very difficult for you guys to appeal to the city council. Way I figure it, you have three options. Obviously you can try and make your case to the council, which will likely take months before any progress is made. Option 2, you can hit the road, find someplace else to build a new home and village, which would still take considerable time and resources you probably don't have. And finally option 3, you can swear your loyalty to me and come under my umbrella and I'll pull some strings and get you set up with everything you need." Once the Uzumaki had finished speaking, Shikaku asked, "You can really do that if we bend the knee?" The Nara silently wondering if Naruto really had that much power and influence to make that a reality. "Of course I can. I wouldn't have offered if I couldn't provide. I'm not in the business of making false promises. At any rate, take a while to think about it. You'll be driven back to your people. Hiashi-san, your daughters will come along, they want to talk to you. Inoichi-san. Ino will come to visit you later. And Tsume-san. Lovely seeing you again, say hi to your Hana for me." The blonde spoke and then mimed a kiss to the Inuzuka, making her blush a bit. Her nose twitching as she caught the scent of a powerful and virile alpha that made her loins burn and ache. The pup had definitely grown, that's for sure. Hiashi nodded in thanks since there were some things he wished to tell his daughters that he never did or could in Konoha. Inoichi was also looking forward to catching up with his daughter as well. Kakashi approached his former pupil and said in a sincere tone, "Hey Naruto, I just wanted to say that I'm sorry. For everything. I was a terrible teacher for neglecting you. I actually feel responsible for what happened with Sasuke. I saw the signs, I could have stepped in, but I didn't because I felt obligated to the memory of my late teammate Obito Uchiha. And for all of my mistakes, you suffered for it. If there's anything I can do to make up for it, lem know." Naruto sucked on his lollipop for a second and then spoke with a smirk, "I certainly appreciate that. At least you have the decency and the balls to properly apologize, unlike Jiraiya. And I'll be sure to cash in that favor you owe at a later time. And the way I figure it, I came out stronger than ever due to my past experiences." Kakashi felt as though a weight had just come off his shoulders, glad that his student wasn't holding a grudge against him. With that out of the way, Naruto couldn't help but wonder where Kurama was. He hadn't seen her all day. Likely out to cause some kind of mischief as per usual. Meanwhile, Korra's room. The avatar had to contain a squeal of delight since she was going to see a bending match tomorrow and even got Tenzin's go-ahead since he'd be busy with the White Lotus and it'd be rude to let the gift go to waste. Though he still cautioned her about accepting presents from Naruto, but at the moment she couldn't care less. She was so excited she was certain that she'd have a hard time falling asleep. She couldn't help but wonder what teams she'd be watching at the match. Her fangirling moment was broken when she saw something move in the corner of her eyes. She looked over towards her new phonograph and saw Kurama sitting next to it with a crooked grin on her muzzle. "Oh. Hey there, Kurama. What are you doing here?" Korra asked with a raised eyebrow, wondering if the kitsune had followed her. Now that she thought about it, didn't Naruto mention something about Kurama being some kind of weapon of mass destruction? The little kitsune seemed so cute and fluffy that there didn't seem to be any way for her to be a living weapon. The kitsune let out a chortle as her tail started moving upwards and revealed the music record that Naruto had given her earlier. The brown-skinned woman blinked her eyes, wondering what the fox's game was as she placed the disc in its appropriate place and gently placed the needle at the edge. After a few seconds, music began to play. We three were all alone. Living in a memory. My echo, my shadow, and me. We three we're not a crowd. We're not even company. My echo, my shadow, and me. What good is the moonlight? The silvery moonlight that shines above. I walk with my shadow. I talk with my echo. But where is the one I love? That song. That was playing in my dream. Korra muttered in horror, her brown skin paling a ghostly white as she fell to the floor. How could Naruto have known about that song? Korra yelled out, pointing an accusatory finger at the kitsune who gave a small laugh. How is this possible? It was all a dream. Korra shouted in denial and shock, her form stiffening as the kitsune padded over to her, a slightly sinister glint in her ruby eyes. Oh sweet Korra. We live and breathe the impossible, do we not? And that is entirely the wrong question. The how doesn't matter. Only the why. Kurama said, speaking to the avatar for the first time. Korra wanted to scream out something, but was silenced when one of Kurama's tails wrapped around her head and kept her mouth shut. Just ask yourself why this is all possible. And let it all sink in. Kurama spoke and then leapt out of the window, vanishing into the darkness of the night, leaving terrified avatar to rock back and forth, hugging her knees as the song continued to play. It was only a dream, she tried to tell herself, but she couldn't see it as a dream anymore. There was much more going on here than she imagined. And once more she would be forced to seek out Naruto for answers. Naruto quietly sat in his library, smiling to himself as he read a book titled Less Miserables. He took a sip of booze from a bottle of liquor as he quietly listened to the rainfall and thunder booming outside. He sensed a presence nearby and without looking from his book, he spoke in a casual tone, "You seem agitated. You could probably use a nice strong drink. I'd be happy to pour a glass for you." Lightning flashed from outside the windows, briefly illuminating the form of Avatar Korra, her cyan blue eyes glaring angrily at him as she spoke. "How did you know?" The blonde took a swig from his bottle of booze and replied in a snarky tone, "You're gonna have to be a bit more specific. What am I supposed to know about? Don't fucking play games with me." "The song. How did you know about the song?" Korra shouted, stomping over towards him, her chest puffing out as her nostrils angrily flared. "What? You didn't like it? I'd be more than happy to give you a different one. You seem like a girl that may like bad to the bone." He replied in a mocking tone and offered the bottle of booze to her. With a sneer she smacked it from his hands, making the bottle hit the floor and roll away, spilling the contents on the floor. "Oh. And I just had the floors waxed. What a waste of good booze." He whined as he set aside his book. The avatar growled and yanked him to his feet, pulling him to eye level as she stared deep into his sea blue eyes. "Quit stalling. Talk. How did you know about the damn song?" She roared furiously, but her rage only seemed to amuse the Yakuza boss even further. "So you're the type of gal that likes it rough, huh? If you wanna tie me down and have your way with me, I'd be happy to accommodate any kinks you may have." He spoke with a chuckle, briefly puckering his lips and making a smooching sound. But the scream, Korra, empowered by her rage, threw him over her shoulders and slammed him onto a nearby desk, her hands wrapping around his throat as she threatened to choke the life out of him. "No. More. Games." She snarled out through her grit teeth. Hot tears starting to stream from the corners of her eyes. "Oh. What are you gonna do? Beat me? An entire village couldn't make me crack. What makes you think you can? Naruto asked with a choked cackle, his eyes glimmering in amusement. Without hesitation, Korra raised her fist and slammed it into his face. The blonde spat out a mix of blood and saliva and grinned at her, "That all you got?" he asked mockingly, making her punch him again, causing more blood and a tooth to fly out. He chuckled a bit and spoke in a venomous voice, "You can't always get what you want with your fists." He spat a thick glob of blood into her face. She growled deeply, her grip tightening around his throat. The Jinchuriki continued grinning at her, which only added fuel to the fire as Korra's vision turned into a blood-red haze. Tell me. How did you know?" the avatar screamed out as she continued to strangle him. "What makes you think I know?" he wheezed out, his question making the avatar pause, her grip loosening slightly to let him get his second wind. "Are you really certain I know anything about a song you had in your dreams? Or are you just trying to convince yourself that I'm some kind of villain that is working against you? Paranoid much?" the Yakuza boss asked with a chuckle. I never said anything about my dreams." Korra mumbled and then realized something. "Am I dreaming?" At her question, lightning flashed once more, illuminating the room, and in her grip wasn't Naruto, but the ink blot she had previously encountered in her dreams. It was staring up at her with glowing blue eyes and a disturbingly toothy grin as it held up a lone finger and pointed to something behind her. Korra slowly turned around and saw a lone box sitting on the couch where Naruto had previously sat. "What's in the box?" she asked, swallowing nervously. The ink blot gave no answer, only continuing to silently grin at her. "What's in the box?" Korra demanded, but the ink-like entity slipped from her grip and slithered out of existence, leaving the avatar all alone. Not seeing any other option, she slowly crept towards the box and cautiously picked it up, giving it a gentle shake to determine what its contents may be. The avatar gave a shaky breath as she slowly pulled the lid open, a thick bead of sweat dripping from her forehead. Biting her lip, she tore the lid open and peered inside at its contents. Korra's room. "Ooh." Korra screeched in horror. Shooting up from her bed and wildly thrashed about as if she were trying to fight something or someone off. She fell to the floor during her struggles with a loud bang. She shook her head and realized she was back in her room, in the waking world, making her sigh in relief. Just a dream. Just a dream. She spoke to herself as though it were a mantra. Undoubtedly it was all a nightmare brought on by her harrowing experience with that damned kitsune. The avatar attempted to take a few breaths to calm herself, but then heard a dripping noise. She slowly looked up and saw the ink blot staring down at her with that same toothy grin. "What do you want? Why are you doing this to me? I never hurt you." She shouted angrily, wanting the so-called spirit to leave her alone. It seemed more akin to a demon now. "See in her?" it hissed out with a muffled chortle and then mockingly flipped her the bird. "So you can talk? I'm going to beat the shit out of you, maybe then you'll leave me alone." Korra growled out, conjuring a pair of flame dagger in her clenched fists. She pounced forward and slammed the full weight of her body into the ink blot. She felt something solid in the goopy mass and quickly latched onto it, putting the flame dagger at its throat. "I got you, you bitch." the avatar screamed with a crazed grin. "Korra. Korra, stop," shouted the voice of Tenzin. The avatar blinked her eyes and found herself surrounded by White Lotus guards, with Tenzin standing a few feet away from her. And in her grip wasn't the ink blot, but a terrified and quivering Jinora, who had tears leaking from her eyes as she let out some muffled sobs through Korra's hand that was covering her mouth. Is this another dream? Another trick?" the waterbender snarled, the White Lotus guards taking on readied stances, though some seemed unsure whether to attack the avatar or not. In any case, they were scared. Korra's eyes were now bloodshot and had a wild and deranged look about them. Tenzin raised his arms in a calming gesture and spoke in a gentle voice, "This isn't a dream. It is real. I promise you." The avatar wanted to believe him, she desperately did. Was this another nightmare? Or was it reality? She herself couldn't tell the difference now, her dreams felt so real that she honestly believed them to be. "Prove it. Prove that this isn't a dream. Prove you're not something that demon conjured," she demanded in paranoia, keeping a firm grip on the young airbender in her arms, not taking the chance that the blot was trying to trick her to save itself. I don't know how. Korra, please listen to me. This is real. Jinora is real. Look at her." the air nomad pleaded, clearly hearing the distress in his voice. She looked down at the girl in her grip who was staring up at her and saw the fear, the pain, and the confusion in her eyes, almost as if she were asking why this was happening. The avatar swallowed a dry lump in her throat, her hand trembling as she mentally debated with herself whether or not to let Jinora go. "It's not my fault. This isn't me. I don't want to hurt anyone." Korra muttered as tears built up in her eyes as Tenzin approached very slowly, making no sudden moves to frighten the brown-skinned girl. "It's alright, Korra. I think I understand your situation. This spirit or demon as you called it clearly has malicious intent. I promise you, Korra, we will find a solution together, but you have to trust me and let Jinora go." The bearded monk spoke in as soft and gentle a voice as he could muster, trying to fight every instinct as a father telling him to yank his daughter away to safety, but he didn't wish to risk harming either of the girls. At last, Korra broke down sobbing as she released Jinora, letting her run into her father's arms, while the avatar curled up into a ball on the floor. When she first arrived, she seemed so confident and ready to begin her duties as the avatar, but now it was clear to see she was suffering immensely. Whoever or whatever this demon was, it is clear to see it intends to do her harm. Tenzin cursed himself for encouraging Korra to try and reach out to this spirit, having forgotten that there are a number of spirits, or demons as some may say, that were of a malevolent nature. He would help Korra through this trial no matter what it took. Later. Daybreak. Korra sat quietly in a vacant chamber, her teacher believing it best if she were kept isolated for the time being until this was resolved. She had no right to protest, not after what she almost did to poor Jinora. She could hear Naga shuffling around outside, faithfully standing guard and occasionally letting out a small whine to let her know that she was out there. The door to the chamber opened, allowing some sunlight inside before it shut again, her teacher approaching with his hands clasped behind his back, an understandably exhausted expression on his face. She too shared in his exhaustion after what happened. "How's Jinora?" the ponytailed girl asked out of concern, feeling like the most awful person in the world right now. "She's fine. Shaken up, but she'll be okay. She was the first to hear you screaming in your sleep and came to check on you. She found you wildly thrashing around and tried to wake you from your nightmare. And then I guess you know the rest." Tenzin spoke as he slumped his shoulders. A stiff silence came between them, it was now so quiet that a pin drop could easily be heard. "I have a theory on what may have happened. The spirit made a connection to you on your first encounter. On the second, it tested the strength of this connection and your weaknesses on this third attempt to try to exploit your mind," Tenzin explained as he sat next to the avatar. "But each time it showed me a vision of Naruto. And the song it played in my second dream was the same exact one that Naruto himself gave me." Korra murmured, using a lone finger to wipe away some moisture from her puffy and red eyes. "This demon may have some kind of connection to him. Maybe even a personal vendetta." The air nomad spoke thoughtfully, trying to theorize what was happening in order to find a solution. "But why come after me? Until a few days ago, I had nothing to do with him," she asked since it didn't make any sense for this creature to torment her like this. "I'm not sure. It is possible it cannot harm him directly, and your meeting with him gave it incentive enough to start attacking you. You both seemed rather chummy when we last visited him. He even thanked you for something you did for him," he stated, though it sounded more like a question since he was out of the loop on what had happened between them. It was after that Toad Sage came here. Naruto was feeling emotional. He really opened up to me and I listened to him. He told me about his missing wife, how she would sing and play piano for him. I felt so bad for him that I sang for him. And then we kissed. I don't even know why I kissed him, but it happened all the same. And then, last night, Kurama showed up and started to play that song. It was like she knew what was going to happen. She somehow knew for sure," she explained, trying her best to keep her voice from trembling. The master airbender was surprised by the confession, more so about the kiss, but it may provide the answers as to why this demon suddenly attacked her in such an aggressive manner. And it seemed like it was at its strongest when the walls around her mind were let down, such as if she were meditating or sleeping. "I don't like this, but I think it best if I call Naruto immediately. Whatever you do, don't fall asleep again," he warned her at the end, fearing that she might actually harm someone or herself if the demon tried any of its trickery again. "I don't think I could if I wanted to," she muttered as she ran a hand through her hair. Her teacher said nothing as he departed to call Naruto. The both of them hoping and praying he could offer them answers on the true nature of this demon haunting and stalking the avatar. The avatar sat in silence as she waited for any kind of news. The door to her chamber opened again, revealing the small form of Jinora carrying a tray of food inside. "Hey. I thought you might be hungry," the young airbender spoke as she placed the tray in front of the water tribe member. I'm sorry, Jinora. I'm so sorry for what I did," the brown-skinned girl mumbled, avoiding eye contact with the airbender. The young girl pursed her lips for a moment, then sat next to the avatar who scooched away. "What happened wasn't your fault, Korra. You weren't yourself at that time," Jinora spoke, trying her best to comfort her friend. Even if she wasn't a shrink, it was easy to tell that poor Korra was feeling both guilty and depressed by the previous events. "Doesn't matter. I could have hurt you, or even killed you if I hadn't stopped." Korra spoke remorsefully as she turned her back towards the young scholar. "Do you want a hug? You look like you could use one," the airbender offered, unsure of what else to do and was met only with silence. "You shouldn't be so hard on yourself. This isn't your fault. We just need to find a way to cut your connection with this entity and you'll be safe, we all will." The book lover spoke, but now it seemed like her friend couldn't even hear her anymore. "Can I have that hug now?" Korra requested with a sniffle, the younger bender smiling warmly as she wrapped her arms around the avatar and embraced her. The two settled into silence as they waited for Tenzin to return, and it wasn't long until he arrived with the Yakuza Naruto himself, and with him was the kitsune perched on his shoulder. "Hey Korra. Tenzin told me what happened. How are you?" The whiskered man asked out of genuine concern, his question though earned a harsh glare from the southern waterbender. "I am being hounded by a demon in my sleep, I almost killed Jinora, and your little furry friend scared the shit out of me last night. How do you think I'm feeling?" She screeched at the end, the force of her voice almost being enough to knock them all off their feet. "Yikes," was the only intelligent response the blonde could mutter as he took a few steps back while the kitsune hopped off his shoulders and approached the avatar. A crooked smile was on the kitsune's muzzle as she spoke, "Hello again Korra." In the background, both of the airbenders were a bit surprised to hear her speak for the first time, but made no comment about it for the time being. The ponytailed girl stiffened in the presence of the kitsune, the little fox smirked as she spoke. "Oh, you don't need to fear me. I've been watching you for some time. Did you know that you talk in your sleep?" At her question, Korra slowly shook her head since she wasn't aware of that. "Is that how you knew about the song? And why were you following me?" Korra asked as she stared at the kitsune, though she couldn't tell if it was staring back at her or simply staring through her. "It is. From the moment I first met you, there was a peculiar stench about you. Smelled like rot and decay. But the smell wasn't on you, it was inside you. I became curious and followed you around for a bit. It didn't take much for me to figure out something wicked came your way. I wondered if the song you were muttering in your sleep would trigger something, and it seemed we both got more than we ever bargained for. You have my sincerest apologies." Kurama explained, inching towards the ponytailed girl at a slow and deliberate pace. "What is this thing? Why is it targeting me?" the avatar asked, earning a shrug from the kitsune, though Naruto chuckled a bit in answer to knows. "Thing is about special people like you and me, chosen by fate, is that the universe just loves to mess with us. For now, I think we should be more concerned with expelling this creature from your mind before we even attempt to discern its true nature and motivations," Kurama pointed out, causing the avatar and the airbenders nodding in agreement. One of the kitsune's tails reached forward and touched the ponytailed girl on the head, a slight tingling sensation appeared on her forehead, and then a sense of safety and security came over her. "I just put up a barricade to shield your mind from any further attacks from this entity that plagues you. Keep in mind that this is but a temporary fix, not a solution. If you're going to remove this cancer from your own mind, you must forcibly drive it out on your next encounter. I suggest you train long and hard to prepare yourself against it, because next time I doubt it'll bother with mind games, it'll attempt to go for the kill." Kurama spoke in a warning tone. The avatar slowly nodded her head, her fists clenching tightly, since she really wanted to pulverize this creature for what it did and for what it showed her. She glanced over at the whiskered man who smiled at her and said, "Don't worry yourself Korra. Me and Kurama can teach you a few things to help give you an edge. We can start your training in the morning, it'll give you a chance to recover from last night." She said nothing to him as she looked at him questioningly, her eyes slowly blinking, prompting the blonde to ask, "There's something wrong Korra? You seem like you want to say something." "No, I'm okay," she muttered as she forced herself to look away from him, although it was clearly obvious there was something else wrong with her. Naruto decided not to push the subject. "As you say. I think it best that me and Kurama stick around for a while in case something else happens. Would also save us the time of going back and forth all the time." Tenzin sighed deeply as he muttered, "I suppose this will be a keep your friends close and enemies closer situation." Which earned a small laugh from the Yakuza boss. "And here I thought we were friends, old timer." Naruto jokingly retorted as he put another of his lollipops into his mouth. "Don't call me old." The air nomad shouted, earning a few giggles from Jinora. Korra then turned to the kitsune and asked her, "Before you told me to ask myself why this is possible. What did you mean by that?" At her question, Kurama gave a smirk as her tails playfully swished about. After a few seconds it was apparent that she wasn't going to answer, making the avatar snarl, "Fine. Don't answer. I'll figure it out myself." She couldn't help but rub her temples in frustration as an enormous headache formed. Evil ink spirits, a tricky kitsune, Yakuza bosses, why couldn't being the avatar be as cut and dry as with Ong? All he had to do was fight a 100-year war and defeat an evil genocidal dictator. She sighed as she got up from the floor, she then remembered something from her dreams and announced, "I almost forgot something. This entity had called me a sinner. And before then it showed me some kind of golden orb with my name inscribed on it. It was like it was taunting me with it." At her words, a loud crunch sound was heard, prompting them to look in Naruto's direction, who had likely bit his lollipop in half, his eyes wide as dinner plates as he stared at the avatar. I need to go." He mumbled and quickly retreated before anyone could stop him. "What was that about?" Tenzin asked with a raised eyebrow, wondering what prompted the Yakuza boss to act so strangely. Korra bit her lip as though she wanted to say something but was holding it back. "I'll talk to him." Jinora spoke in a concerned tone as she chased after the Jinchuriki. All the while Kurama couldn't help but chortle at this new development. The young scholar found Naruto standing at the beach, staring out across the bay muttering to himself something like "I thought it was destroyed." Jinora approached him and spoke gently, "Hey. Are you okay?" The blonde ceased his murmurings and turned to her for a brief moment before returning his attention to the bay. "I'm okay." What Korra said reminded me of something. He replied as he pulled a green lollipop from a small case and put into his mouth. "Something painful maybe? Would you like to talk about it?" She asked in a sympathetic tone, casually walking up to him until she stood side by side with him. "Maybe later." He replied curtly and then smiled at her, extending the case of lollipops to her as if offering one. "Dad says I'm not supposed to accept gifts or candy from strangers." Jinora spoke in a half-joking and half-serious tone, smirking at the Yakuza boss. "Good advice. But we aren't really strangers, are we?" He quipped with a snarky tone. The scholar shrugged her shoulders and picked a red lollipop and put it in her mouth. A sense of calmness washing over her as the taste of cherries flooded her mouth. "Do you know what this thing is that's haunting Korra?" The airbender asked as she looked up at the whiskered man. He hummed and thawed as he rolled his own lollipop inside of his mouth. She waited patiently for his reply as she enjoyed the sugary sweetness and the gorgeous view of the bay and Republic City that her home island offered. Finally he replied, "I may have an idea. But I don't want to say anything until I am absolutely certain. If I am wrong the consequences could be dire. But if I'm right, they may be far worse." "That sounds ominous." She pointed out the calming sensation provided by the lollipop now turning to a euphoric sensation as her cheeks turned a light shade of pink. Just what was in the sugary treat that made it taste so damn good? The blonde grunted his agreement as his eyes flashed a deep crimson color. Out of nowhere, Jinora giggled to herself and then spoke without thinking, "Has anyone told you how handsome you look?" Naruto smirked a bit and replied, "My wives always tell me something nice like that every day. It is always nice to be appreciated by the ones you love." The young airbender giggled as she continued to suck on her candy, a warm sensation washing over her body as she let out a quiet moan. A comfortable silence falling between them, however deep in Naruto's mind the wheels of thought couldn't stop turning. That night. On the streets of Republic City, lone delivery truck could be seen driving at a modest pace. At first glance, one may believe it is just another truck going about its business and its occupants drew the graveyard shift, but that is not the case here. The three men aboard the truck were of the equalist movement. They and several other cells were working on delivering and distributing the weaponry from their benefactor, preparing their forces for when Amon calls for them all to make their big move. The equalists retained a respectful silence with each other, opting to listen to the music playing over the radio as they drove to their destination. The man in the passenger seat yawned a bit and looked out the window and saw something leap across the rooftops. "Hey. Did you guys see that?" he asked his cohorts who gave confused huzz. "See what?" "I've been keeping my eyes on the road. And Kenny's watching the stuff in the back. That's expensive gear and Amon wants it well taken care of." The driver muttered, only sparing his partner a brief glance and tried to focus on the road ahead of him. "Not sure what I saw. Could be something. Could be nothing. Almost seemed like something is there it is again." The passenger yelped out at the end, seeing the same figure hop across another rooftop before vanishing out of sight. "Is it the cops?" "What did you see, Kyle?" The one called Kenny asked as he poked his head out from the back end of the truck, having overheard his partner's conversation. Before Kyle could even answer, something crashed into the hood of the truck making the men scream in terror. The horrifying figure with glowing orange eyes and devil horns stared at them through the glass, laughing maniacally as it screamed, "Here's Jackie." The driver slammed his foot into the gas pedal, making the vehicle accelerate. "What the hell is that thing?" Kyle screamed out. The figure held up a clawed hand and punched clean through the glass and began to swipe at him with its clawed fingers, threatening to disembowel him as he pushed himself as far into his seat as possible. "The brakes. The brakes." Kenny called out, prompting their driver to slam his foot on the brakes to throw off their attacker. They all lurched forward when they came to a stop and Jackie flew off while cackling menacingly. "What the fuck was that thing?" The driver yelled out, his mind running a mile per second as the adrenaline coursed through his body. "Who the fuck cares? Fucking drive before it comes back." Kenny screamed, causing their driver to nod and slammed his foot on the gas, causing the truck to take off down the street, the equalists no longer caring if the police chased after them. "Not with that thing out there." They heard the same cackling return, though this time it seemed to be coming from behind the truck. "Holy fucking ass crackers. It's back." Kenny screamed out, causing Kyle to look in his rearview mirror and see their pursuer was somehow skating across the pavement with ease. It raised an open palm up and a loud boom was heard, followed by a wet splatter as blood and bits of brain matter fell on Kyle and the driver. Oh my god. They killed Kenny. Kyle screamed upon seeing the remains of Kenny's head as his body fell to the floor in the truck's rear. He looked again to try and find the creature chasing them, only to find it was now gone. Holy shitfic. The driver yelled as the figure stood in the middle of the road, its open maw making a crude yet menacing smile as flames appeared from its mouth. Left. Left. Kyle shouted. The driver turned in the designated direction, the tires screeching along the pavement as they tried to avoid the demonic entity. They raced down the road, frantically searching for any signs of their pursuer, and then a series of loud explosions was heard as the truck suddenly swerved and the driver could no longer control the vehicle. They crashed into the corner of the building, which sent Kyle flying out the front window and onto the pavement, the friction and impact of the landing, leaving a crimson streak in the pavement. The driver groaned, blood leaking from his forehead as he popped his seatbelt and fumbled his way out of the driver's seat. He fell to the ground and groaned in pain, and when he looked up, the demonic figure was staring down at him. Its talons making clicking noises as it clenched and unclenched its fist. Please spirits. Don't kill me. I'm just a driver. He pleaded desperately, shielding his face behind his arms. Then began to scream in fear as the figure grabbed him by the leg and started dragging him away from the truck. The figure laughed cruelly all the while and then spoke in a deep and raspy voice that seemed to echo a bit. Allow me to introduce myself, little man. I am Spring-Heeled Jack. And I approve of the following message. The figure known as Jack raised its clawed fist to the sky and then snapped its fingers, making a few sparks fly for a moment, and then the truck suddenly exploded, destroying all the weapons inside. And in the span of a few seconds, more explosions could be heard across a variety of distances. If you value your life, go to the police. Tell them your story. Tell the press that Spring-Heeled Jack declares war on the Fraudamon and all who follow him. Spring-Heeled Jack spoke and crouched down for a moment before leaping almost 20 feet in the air and flew away, leaving the lone equalist driver to whimper and shiver in fear. Fortunately for him, he didn't need to go directly to the cops. The sounds of sirens were coming towards him. Meanwhile, Air Temple Island. Naruto hummed quietly to himself as he sat on the bed of the guest room that Tenzin had allotted to him, with Kurama curled up on his lap and purring in content. There was a knock on his door prompting him to call out for his visitor to enter. The door opened and revealed Korra stepping inside, currently dressed in her pajamas, her hair rugged and unkempt. I see you didn't waste any time in getting settled. She spoke, pointing out his comfortable position. My wives will bring some of my stuff tomorrow, and they can run my businesses without me there, so I can focus on training you. It'd be a hassle for both of us, going to and from my casino. And, just a heads up, I like to sleep in the nude, so be mindful of that whenever you come to visit. He spoke at the end teasingly. She blushed a little, but paid no mind to the little joke and spoke. I just wanted to say thank you for everything. If you hadn't helped me, well, I don't think it'd be a good idea to dwell on that anymore. At her words, the whiskered man nodded in agreement. Her eyes flicked over to the slumbering Kitsune and asked, is she really asleep? I'm not. Came the quick reply of the Bijuu as she stretched out her limbs and smirked at the avatar, who frowned a bit. While she was grateful for her help in building that mental barrier, she couldn't fully bring herself to trust such a devious creature. Naruto, can we talk? Alone? Korra asked, crossing her arms and glaring at the fox. The Kitsune shrugged her shoulders and replied, no worries kiddies. I have more important things to do. Feel free to go at it like Rabaroos. With that said, Kurama hopped off the blonde's lap, then disappeared through an open window, leaving the two alone at last. There's something you want to talk about that you don't feel comfortable speaking about in front of Kurama? Or do you just want to get me alone for something else? The blonde asked with a small smirk, the blank look from the avatar giving him his answer as his face changed to a more neutral disposition. He muttered a small apology and gestured for her to speak. How much do you trust Kurama? Korra asked bluntly, not even wasting any time with her questioning. Without any hesitation, the Yakuza boss replied, I'd trust her with my life, no questions asked. Why? Would she ever lie to you? Or withhold something important from you? She asked with a scowl. The blonde man seemed almost amused by her questions. Korra. You forget, I have known Kurama all my life. She has literally been there for me since day one of my existence. She would never lie to me. She may withhold something from me on occasion, but usually it is for good reason, and when she does, she tells me so. Don't tell me that you've never done something like that before. He asked, getting a strong feeling that the avatar was holding something back. She stiffened up at his words, swallowing a dry lump in her throat which didn't go unnoticed by him, but he said nothing about it. Well, if that's all, could you please leave? I want to call Kurama back before she wanders too far. He spoke in a somewhat rushed tone as he walked over to the window, looking for any sign of his vulpine companion. Why? You worried about her or something? The avatar asked with a raised eyebrow, noting that the blonde seemed a little agitated for some reason. It's not that, it's actually a little embarrassing for me. He mumbled and scratched the back of his head. Korra wanted to make some kind of a joke and mess with him, but she couldn't bring herself to do it and simply asked why. What's wrong? The blonde sighed and reluctantly answered, I can't sleep by myself. At his words, the avatar felt her heart sink a little in her chest. His voice sounded almost afraid. Lonely? Both. Sighing quietly, he continued to speak to her. I know how I must seem to you. Some snarky and often flirty Yakuza boss with a bunch of wives. But the truth is that I'm afraid. I can't stand to be alone anymore. And I never want to experience the feeling of being all alone or losing the people I care for. Not ever again. My doctor says it's called monophobia, the fear of being alone. The brown-skinned woman felt some tears build in her eyes, seeing Naruto in a sad and vulnerable state. Why was he always like this around her? None of your wives can swing by to keep you company? She asked as she approached him, sitting at the edge of his bed. They're all busy with personal business, major assignments, unable to break cover, or helping the police search the city for any more of those rude anbu like the guy you caught. He answered with a sigh, feeling embarrassed that he was acting like a little kid right now. However, there were some types of wounds one could never get over completely. Korra scooched up to him and looped an arm around his shoulders, gently placing her head against his in a show of affection and concern. I'll stay with you till Kurama gets back. If you want. She offered, the blonde uttering a quiet thank you as he welcomed the contact. The avatar had no idea why she was doing this, but she knew she couldn't let him be alone. They spent the next hour or so in a tender embrace, just talking. Talking about their childhoods, about the things they liked, the things they didn't like, and other such casual talk. She felt herself relax, a small part of her not wanting to leave him at all as they shared some laughs, vented out some frustration and so forth. They continued speaking long into the night until they fell asleep in each other's arms. A happy smile on Naruto's face as he held the avatar flush against his body, one hand rubbing her toned abs and the other stroking her signature ponytail. The avatar's face showed that she was both content and peacefully asleep, her dreams remaining undisturbed as happier memories flowed through her mind. In her sleep she quietly muttered, I will always love you. Forever and beyond. I'm yours. The next morning. Korra yawned as her eyes began to flutter open. The first thing she saw after fully opening her eyes was Naruto's sleeping face. She blushed deeply upon realizing that she must have fallen asleep with him without meaning to. Well, it's not like anything really happened between them, so what was there to worry about? She slowly tried to free herself from his grip without waking him, but the whiskered man whined in his sleep and pulled her flush against his body. Muttering something that sounded like don't go. She sighed and realized that she was currently trapped until he woke up and then felt something poking against her thigh. She slowly looked down and her eyes widened since she could clearly see his morning erection through his boxers and it seemed ready to tear through the fabric at any moment. She wasn't sure if it would be a better idea to wait for him to wake up or to just wake him up now. Deciding to take her chances, the avatar spoke. Oi. Naruto. Wake up already. Quit molesting me. He didn't seem to respond and only pulled her in closer, his erection now rubbing against her own crotch, making her blush a dark crimson at what was happening. Wake up, you goddamn blockhead. She spoke louder, rocking her body back and forth to try and jostle him awake. Again, no response. Either this guy could sleep through a hurricane or he was already awake and just messing with her. Her movements only made their genitals rub together through their undergarments, making her moan a bit at the content, a hot feeling entering her loins as she felt herself becoming wet from the contact. Please wake up. Don't make me do something I'll regret. She pleaded with him and then tried to push herself away from him, but she couldn't get any leverage to summon her full strength. This is too cute. Spoke a female voice that sounded oddly familiar to the avatar, who looked down and saw a woman sitting at the foot of the bed. She had vibrant crimson hair, caramel-colored skin, a highly curvaceous body that could make many women feel inadequate, ruby red eyes and whisker markings on her cheeks, and 9 fluffy foxtails coming from her rear. Surprised, my dear? Am I so beautiful to behold? You have lost your voice. The woman spoke with a giggle. Kurama? The ponytailed girl asked, earning a nod from the kitsune, who had finally revealed her human form for the first time. Shaking off her surprise, the avatar pleaded, help me. Naruto won't let go and I'm stuck. The kitsune gave a mischievous grin as she replied, I know. My poor kid can't stand to be without companionship. I could give you a helping hand for a price. Nothing of consequence, just a favor. The avatar didn't seem to care about that and spoke, I'll do anything you want, just please save me before I lose my virginity. At that, the kitsune nodded in agreement and snapped her fingers, her form instantly replacing herself in Korra's position, who was now at the foot of the bed, free at last from Naruto's grip. Better run along now, dear. Don't want people getting the wrong impression. Kurama suggested in a sensual tone, making the waterbender blush a bit. If she were caught sleeping in the same room as Naruto, she wouldn't ever hear the end of it. So she decided to make a hasty retreat to her room before word got out. Once she was finally gone, Kurama's tails wrapped around Naruto's body, causing his body to relax in the warm and soft fur as he sighed in relaxation. If only Korra knew of a special trick to wake him up, she would have had a much easier time waking him. All you can eat at Ichiraku's, she muttered, making the blonde's eyes snap open as he came to full alertness. Good morning, dear. You were holding the avatar hostage, so I came to the rescue. Kurama spoke in a sickly sweet voice, planting a tender kiss on his lips. How heroic. And what did your assistance cost her? A favor. When people owe you favors, they tend to prefer digging their own graves and burying themselves in them. The blonde spoke in a deadpan tone, earning a dry laugh from his companion. Don't worry. I'll be as gentle as a lamb with her. Now then, do you want me to do something about that? She asked, pointing down to his erection which twitched and throbbed inside of his boxers. The Uzumaki groaned in disappointment and replied, as much as I would love to, I have other obligations today, such as starting Korra's training. That aside, a quickie won't be enough to satisfy either of us, and once we get started, we won't be stopping anytime soon. And here I was hoping to break our current record of mind-blowing orgasms. But I see your point. Just be sure to not let your lust build up too much. A Jinchuriki's libido can be a nasty thing. She warned him with a playful giggle. She then pulled out a newspaper and presented it to him. I think you might be interested in the front page article. She spoke as she used her tails to hold the paper up where he could read it. There was a picture of officers escorting away a man in handcuffs as firemen worked to put out a flaming truck. Naruto quirked up an eyebrow as he read through the article's contents. Last night, an unknown figure identified only as Spring-Heeled Jack attacked a truck that was being manned by Equalist members. The only survivor, a driver, gave testimony of his encounter with the creature, describing it as a demonic entity that was capable of flight, extraordinary leaps and other inexplicable abilities, and his activities in the Equalist movement, including the smuggling of new and advanced weaponry and underground tram tunnels used by the Equalists to move their weapons and supplies below ground. It is widely speculated that after this expose, that the Equalists will be viewed less as a civil rights movement and more of a terrorist organization plotting against Republic City. Authorities have already begun searching for Equalist leader Amon and any other prominent members identified by the driver. More shall be reported as this story develops. The blonde was silent for a few moments and then smiled darkly as he spoke. I'm not sure whether to applaud Jack for his accomplishment or to berate him for acting without my say-so. We'll need to have a word with Jack. However, there was one other concern: how did this demon Korra encountered in her mind have the anchor? Meanwhile, Sato's state. In the office of Hiroshi Sato, the founder and CEO of Future Industries, the man himself was sitting at his desk, drinking an extremely expensive wine that was an old favorite of his late wife's, a little something he had been saving for a special occasion. On his desk was the morning paper, the article of Spring-Heeled Jack on full display. Hiroshi was an intelligent man and had already crunched the numbers. The drivers the Equalists employed were highly knowledgeable of their various bases and caches, including his underground workshop where he had been developing advanced weapons technology for the Equalist movements, and now it was only a matter of time before the police arrived. This Jack character had, in the span of a single night, destroyed a large amount of stockpiled weaponry, exposed their supply routes, ruined the Equalists' reputation, and exposed one of their most valuable members, Hiroshi himself. And all it took to unravel it all was the testimony of a single traumatized truck driver. And now here he was, drinking to his own arrest that was on the horizon. His daughter entered inside with a downcast look on her face as she spoke. Dad. The police are here. The businessman nodded slowly and laced his fingers together as Chief Bifrong and her men stepped inside. Hiroshi Sato. We have a warrant for your arrest. We followed our witness's testimony and found the underground factory. The chief spoke professionally and held out 2 pairs of cuffs, one for each of the Satos. Hiroshi stood up slowly, making no sudden movements as he spoke. Do as you will with me. I'll fully cooperate. But please, leave Asami out of this. She has had nothing to do with the Equalists. It was all me. Nevertheless, we still need her to make a statement. If you cooperate, Mr. Sato, you may be given a plea bargain. The chief spoke, earning a nod from both of the Satos as they gave no resistance when the cuffs were clapped on their wrists. We can start with this. Where is Amon, and who is he really? The chief asked with a dark glare, very much looking forward to arresting the big boss of the Equalists himself. I'm sorry, but I can't answer either of those questions, even if I wanted to. He could be anywhere in the city, be anybody. No one has ever seen him without his mask. Not even me or his number 2. Hiroshi replied honestly, sensing his sincerity. The chief nodded in understanding. Even if he couldn't identify Amon, Mr. Sato could still help put away a number of other members of this terrorist organization. Without a word further, the Satos were gently escorted outside. For the time being, it seemed as though peace and order could be maintained in the city. End chapter. So this part ends here. If you want to see next part of this series, like the video now and share the story with your friends. Bye bye.